Welcome, everyone. This is our first online event as part of AI for the rest of us. I'm Hannah Foxwell, and I'm joined today by Darryll Colthrust and Walter Heck, a couple of absolute legends. And what we're going to do today, this isn't your average webinar. We're not trying to sell you anything. There's going to be no boring slides to be seen. We're here today for happy hour vibes and no boring slides. We're going to have a good conversation about a topic that's important to a lot of people right now. Everyone I know has got a bit of AI FOMO, and AI is creeping into our roles, our lives, and our jobs in a much bigger way, an increasing way all the time. And one of the things that I feel very vividly as a person who works in technology is that I want to be able to have better conversations. Like, what are the options available if I want to integrate an AI component or an AI technology into either an internal process or into one of my digital products? What are those considerations? And so that's the conversation that we're going to be having today. And I'm so happy that you came to join us. But first, before we dive in, I'm going to ask Darryll and Walter just to give a little bit of an overview who you are and what you do. Do you want to jump in, Darryll?
Sure, thank you. Darryll Colthrust. I'm the co-founder and CTO at a company called Chapter, and also AI board advisor for the Holzbrink Group. We're one of the largest publishing companies in the world, and I have two jobs. One which is obviously looking after the engineering team within our company, and secondly also just providing guidance support for the rest of the business units across the Holzbrink Group.
Okay, so you're the person that other people go to for advice on how to do this well. So you're the right person to ask all my questions.
If they can't find anybody else, then
No, don't
yes.
be modest. That's your job, Darryll. That's literally your job. I always learn so much when I chat to Darryll. This is going to be awesome. Walter, who are you? What do you do?
I am Walter, and I tinker with computers. I started my career as a developer and held pretty much every technical position that you can imagine. I did in the very beginning, in the late 90s, early 2000s, I did Windows API programming, which is something I cannot recommend to anyone. But from there, went through DBA work, SysOps, did corporate training for a while, started my own company, eventually sold it, became CTO at the company that acquired us, and then last year started Alexiora, and in Alexiora we do data and AI consulting and engineering, and since then I've been playing around with all of the cool Gen AI, LLM, RAG stuff that the world has to offer, and now, like so many of us, so like Darryll, I don't necessarily think that I know everything there is to know, but I also think that I've learned quite a few things over the last year, and happy to.
Absolutely. Like, you see LLM and Raggy stuff, and like these are new terms to a lot of people. Like, you might have heard of an LLM, but you might not actually know what it is and how it works. You might not know how to assess all of these different LLM options that are now available to us. So I think even your very modest amount of knowledge is something that everyone could benefit from. So what we're talking about today is essentially deployment options, because we all know that you can like open up ChatGPT and you can write a prompt and you can interact with LLMs in that way. What I didn't realize, and this is relatively recent, and shame on me for not knowing this, is that you can actually pick up sort of open models, open LLMs that are pre-trained on a whole load of data, and you can just deploy them. I had this light bulb moment at a meetup that I went to where one of my friends had deployed, I think it was called Llama. I think that's one of the things. It was a Llama deployed on an old laptop, and he was able to deploy his own LLM. And I was like, wait a minute. I thought it was only like the big tech giants who had billions of dollars to spend who could actually leverage this technology. And so that was why I started to get excited about it. I was like, suddenly the cost to implement these things has come right down. It's so much more accessible for your average company, your average engineer to start tinkering with this. And I think that's incredibly exciting because not long ago that would not have been possible. So let's dive in. Let's talk about the deployment options. I'm going to put my product hat on for a minute. I'm in product, and I'm coming to my engineering team. I'm saying I want to integrate some of these LLMs into a user interface. What are my options? What's the answer you would give me?
You want to go, Darryll?
No, go ahead.
So there are, unfortunately for you, many options. So we're gonna have a long conversation, but as with many things, I think that it's important to start somewhere. So I think for most people, the first place to start is just by talking to, I don't know, OpenAI API, the guys who make ChatGPT. It's super simple to set up. It costs nearly nothing. We have a development environment that spent $4.24 last month in the entire month. So that's kind of how cheap it is to try and to get in to start playing with it. And then later on, when you start to think, okay, now I understand how I can talk to such an API and what I can do, then you can start talking about, okay, is there a better way to do this for our specific use case?
And I think if you're unfortunate enough to have to come and ask me, I think my first immediate response, usually with a lot of this stuff, is that it may not always actually require the use of AI initially. So obviously kind of really digging into what exactly is the problem, because AI is a very, very broad, has a very, very broad scope. And usually whenever someone today is coming to say they want to do AI, they're usually talking about generative AI. So it may not be necessary. But let's say that it is, and we're in that world where we want to do stuff. Actually, again, so what Walter's mentioned is definitely correct. Like there are lots of options out there. OpenAI being the simplest, easiest one. You then also got Gemini, which is also available from Google, and you got Anthropic's options as well. But I think specifically from a product perspective, depending upon what you're wanting to do, sometimes there's certain models that may be better at what you're asking for, depending upon what the product's supposed to be doing. So the answer is it depends on what you want to do.
Like
Yeah.
always.
Oh, always. And I think that's it. Like, so everyone's got all of these options, and it's like, well, which one is the right answer? And there isn't a right answer, is there?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the folks I talk to, because my background is like very, very like sort of enterprisey tech, folks who are really concerned about data security, confidentiality. They are not comfortable just working against maybe the OpenAI sort of API interfaces or ChatGPT. They don't want to introduce that risk into their environment if they're doing something in a very highly regulated or sensitive or confidential kind of domain. And this is where I think the light bulb moment for me was about the self-hosted models. And I know, Walter, you've done a lot of work sort of working with those. Is there any advice you would give folks who can't just go and like program against a public API?
Yeah, so I think maybe to take one step back, it's good to start a little bit at the top for people who are just getting their heads around this. LLM stands for large language model, and basically if you're not gonna go into much detail, what a LLM does is it's based on the data it was trained on, it predicts when there's a word, it predicts what would be the next most likely word. In its basis, that is what it is. This is interesting because you can understand that the more data it's trained on, the better the quality of the prediction is going to be. Just like if you, as a human, read more books, you're probably going to have more knowledge and have a better vocabulary than if you read just one children's book. So that said, the funny part also is that this technology actually is, most of the core technology is like 30 years old. It's not actually something new. It's just we've recently decided to put a lot more compute against this, put more servers to calculating these and training these models, and by companies like OpenAI putting like billions into this, they actually are able to get to where they are. So that's one thing. The thing is that in this specific case with an LLM, roughly bigger equals better. So the question really is, if you want to be privacy sensitive and have all of this locally, then that's entirely possible. Most of the big cloud providers offer ways to do this so that it is on a cloud, but in your own account and in your own environment. And that is already a good option, because then you are, the LLM lives in your AWS account, and you have control over what you put in into it and what comes out of it. It doesn't go to an external company. But you already give up a little bit, right? Because now you need to. Now you're in charge of actually managing this, making sure that it keeps running, that blah blah blah, all of those things you get for free, quote unquote, with OpenAI. So that's a good option. Then your next option is to, if you're a little bit more sensitive, you can go and rent servers somewhere or buy servers and have your own data centers, and then put deploy LLMs on there. That's quite involved, and it requires quite expensive hardware. So there's a component in a computer that used to be for a graphics card, but it just so happens to be that it's also crazy good at this kind of LLM computations. So you need GPUs, and also there it's bigger is better, but it's also much more expensive. So the top ones are like $20,000 a piece. So compare that to the $4 that you were spending that we spent on our development environment last month. You need to do some serious stuff to make that worth the cost.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think everyone's trying to uncover like use cases for this technology, and it is always good to experiment and start small, but it's completely over engineered if you're deploying this type of technology, for example, so that you can have a chat interface with your like travel and expenses policy. Do you know what I mean? I've heard that.
Yeah.
I've heard that done as an experiment, but
Yeah, no, and I think like before we get into the I guess custom deployments, I think the majority of businesses today, depending upon what they're looking to do, will likely be best served just utilizing a commercial model out there, because you've got to remember that these commercial models, they've effectively been trained on most things on the internet. And actually, if you're looking, depending upon what the problem is, it's likely that this model has been trained on some content or some information that is actually relevant and pertinent to your field of work. And to the point you made before, the cost associated with stuff is really, really cheap. So actually, it does not take that much at all for you to test and experiment. I think what tends to cause people to fall over a little bit is that they think that they need something much bigger, and they need to do something really splashy and amazing and spend a whole ton of money. When in actual fact, you talked about like Walter, like that $4. We just ran a global hackathon, 50 teams, and we spent maybe $200, and that's like everybody actually just hammering away at these solutions. So the cost to be able to experiment is really cheap. Actually, the ability to be able to experiment is also really easy. So the majority of these things, like if you wanted to test these solutions, is all via the browser. So actually, it shouldn't take you long to kind of, if you're coming again, putting your product hat on and you've come, actually, it should be quite easy to kind of sit down, discuss, have a chat, play, and see what's there. The only times that I've seen where you really need to start looking at your own self-deployments is when you're looking at something which is really, really niche, and you want to get, hyper level of accuracy around what it is you're doing. So for most things, general knowledge is more than good enough. If you then want to go really deep into something, that's when you have to start thinking about deploying your own model. But the costs for training these models has already been borne by the big tech companies. They've already spent billions. So if you think that you can either spend that same kind of money, or you think that actually what's there isn't good enough for you, then you already are in a completely different space, and you already know that you need to do that niche stuff.
Not many people are in that space, honestly. For sure.
It's,
And I do love the amount of open technology and free or affordable tech that there is today. And I think it's driving so much innovation and so much creativity. And that's very exciting.
I get a lot of while Darryll is talking, I totally agree with him. I get a lot of flashbacks to the big data time where people said, we have big data, and then you ask, okay, so how many racks of servers do you have? Because that's when you start talking about big data, and they'd be like, oh yeah, we have 100 gigabytes of data. That's a lot, but it's not big data. So please don't deploy all of the stuff that you that was hyped back then. And I think now we're in a similar stage. People think they need it. Maybe there's some kind of coolness to wanting to be big enough to need it. I don't know what it is, but most people just shouldn't.
Yeah. I want to go back to what you just said about that hackathon, Darryll, because I have seen a sort of resurgence of hackathons recently, specifically around AI. And I think it's because of the amount of like experimentation that you sort of need to do to like just familiarize yourself with the technology. And in your day-to-day work, like we're all busy, aren't we? We're all busy. Like it's really hard to like carve out the time to do that experimentation. And so a lot of companies are making that space. They kind of see it's important that everyone goes on that learning journey. But yes, I think it's really interesting. I know that there is a hackathon happening, an AI hackathon happening the week after next in London. That John Willis, who is one of the sort of instigators and forefathers of the DevOps movement, he's going to be there for that. I'll share that on LinkedIn after this. But yeah, it's not the only one. I think Google recently ran the largest hackathon ever, and it was an AI hackathon. And you completely understand it. It's like, hey, like take all of our amazing tools. Like we've built some great stuff. Like please go and experiment with it. Like it's a great way to learn, isn't it?
It's interesting because I think that the speed at which you can deliver at a hackathon has immensely increased. We were just talking with Darryll about developing with stuff like Cursor and Replit, and he has shared some cool tech as well. And now you can just say what you want and actually have a good prototype developed in front of your eyes. It's the speed at which this stuff is happening is crazy, and it's perfect for a hackathon because there you're not looking for production level code. You're not looking to build something that can last years. It's something for this weekend, for this for today, and that's where this kind of technology is really amazing. And they also use LLMs underneath.
And I was just to that point you just made. I can't stress enough. Like for the non-technical people, like you will see people build stuff really, really quickly and think, "Yep, we can now deploy these things." But actually, all of the engineering standards and all of the things that you'd need to usually go through before you deploy something publicly, you still have to go through those steps. But actually, we should be able to prototype things really quickly to just make sure that we're all aligned before we apply more resources to go and build something.
Yeah, well, and as a product person, I think this is incredible. Like, so to be able to experiment and test an idea before you invest an awful lot of engineering time and productionization and operability, the cost of experimentation and the cost of failure is so much lower. Because as a product person, like, failure is a good thing. You've eliminated one course of action and you can correct. And the faster you get that feedback loop moving, the closer you get to actually uncovering what your users actually need. So I think actually, this rapid prototyping that we can do now, I think it bleeds into the product domain very, very seamlessly. It's like, can you imagine if you could put some tools in a product manager's hands?
That
Like,
sounds dangerous.
no, we're good people, honestly. But no, or maybe you don't have to like spend multiple engineering cycles to test an idea that never works out. Do you know what I mean?
I saw a post this morning on X, really interesting, with someone who said, I had an idea, and instead of taking the traditional path of trying to convince my engineering team that we should look into this and that it's a good idea, I spent 1 hour building a prototype with Cursor and in this case Replit out. And he posted the YouTube video of him doing this in 54 minutes. And like, that's a kind of a place we're at. And I can just show a live prototype. Hey, what if we did something like this? Incredibly powerful, much more better use of your time than trying to figure out, especially developers are generally not great at the convincing stuff and building a slide deck or whatever you need to convince your team. So being able to just build it is really incredible.
Yes,
I
a
think
demo is so much more powerful than a slide or a mock-up or why, that's it's got to be the future, hasn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's again to the points around, like, do you use SaaS solutions? Do you use cloud deployments? Like the ability to kind of just make this stuff immediately available for everybody. There are so many tools out there for you to be able to experiment with that in actual, well, funnily enough, it's more expensive getting the subscriptions to some of these tools so that you can play around than the actual cost of the usage cost of an LLM, just generally, because of all the other wonderful packages that they have around it. But it's the cost for experimentation is nothing in comparison to what it used to be. And I really like the example also of the if you can imagine it, then you can build it, is kind of the area that we're moving into.
And that's very cool. Like, I remember when I was doing Delphi development back in the late 90s, I had a big book of Delphi code, or I had several actually, that I would read, in the toilet always. And I'd read new stuff and then I'd come out and go, oh my God, I can do this thing. And like, the speed at which you would learn new things would just dramatically lower than after consumer internet became a real thing and things were online, blogging, all of that stuff started happening. You could learn much faster. And I think this is another iteration on top of this where the learning is even more fast than it was before.
Yeah, and actually, this reminds me of the conversation we were having earlier. Is like, actually, is the skill sets that we need today in tech, especially in engineering, is that evolving? And if you have you experienced any of that evolution firsthand? I know I've definitely had conversations with folks about how they're adapting their hiring processes, for example. What do you think that future might look like? I shouldn't have phrased the question that way, should I? Because when you say, like, give me your version of the future, like, actually, just, what questions are you asking yourself right now? And nobody has the answers, do they?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because there's this, and I'm really curious to see how this will go at AI for the rest of us. What I always see is that there's like conference world, and then there's the real world, and like, by living in a startup-y environment, we live a little bit more close to the conference world type of place. But then I advised, for instance, the previous company that I was CTO at, I do some advisory for them. They are still debating whether or not they will allow their developers to use something like Copilot. and I understand it because they come from a much more traditional background. But in the meantime, they're just losing, not losing, they're missing out on the speed that they could be having. And I think that's a interesting debate, because some people are worried that their code will end up in a training algorithm for the next biggest thing. Yeah.
So, if I can give two sides, one the technical and non-technical. So I think from the non-technical perspective, it is the age-old question of like, this new tech has come along, is it going to take my job, etc. And it's something that is obviously been sensationalized quite a lot, and we face in all of the companies that we generally exist in. I think that if you split up jobs into, then you have your roles, and then you have your tasks, and then you have your activities. And in terms of AI taking over someone's whole job today, I don't think that we are there just yet. Like I do believe that it'll come, but I don't believe that we're there just yet. However, an AI taking over certain tasks or activities that you do, definitely. And I think that's one of the things that companies should really be starting to think about, is looking at the skills that you have within the organization, the tasks and activities that people are doing, and then just starting to identify in a year, 2 years time, or even if you took where technology is today, like which tasks do we think will be best served by handing this, like not handing over, but like giving this to an AI system or solution to do, because there are lots of situations where actually the machine is better than the human, and I think like we need to recognize that, appreciate that, but actually then taking that time to then step back and say, right, 30% of these particular tasks within these people's jobs will likely be done better by a machine. So how do we then develop individuals to be able to do more? And this is not increasing their workload, but actually with the use of new technologies, where you used to have a very vertical kind of job role and is your specific career ladder, actually I think we're going to start to see certain jobs that are quite close and adjacent, because with the tools now you're able to do more on either side. Actually, the roles themselves now become a little bit broader because they can use these technologies to do more. And actually starting to develop your staff in that direction, I think, is quite an important thing to look into. From a technical perspective, I personally think that engineers should be looking at what's coming and just wringing their hands with glee and joy. Like I remember the first time I used GitHub Copilot, and I was like, "Oh, this is pretty cool." And then we were talking earlier about Cursor, and I remember trying it, and I was like, "I feel like I need to actually change how I think about programming, because now actually what I'm thinking about logically, I can now reapply." I think anyone who's in this space, technically minded, should be looking at all these tools and thinking, look at how much more that I'll be able to do and produce. Like I can actually now spit out solutions much faster than I was able to before, and actually a lot more expansive. So again, the similar thing of what are the things that you tend to like not want to have to do, with code, or I'll take that library from here, or I'll take this code from here, and actually recognize that given some of these tools and technologies coming out, your productivity will massively increase by 30, 40, 50% easily once you get tuned to how you use these solutions.
It's crazy because your cognitive load just lowers, right? So let's say that I'm developing something and I know a little bit of Python. This is how I started a couple months ago. I know a little bit of Python. I know generally what goes on a front end. I know which technologies are being used, but by God, am I no JavaScript, CSS front end kind of expert. And now I can just not have to dig into how the hell does this technology actually work, but I can use something like Cursor and say, make me a JavaScript CSS front end that does this thing and that thing, and when I click here, it does that, and when I hover over that, this disappears, and that just works. And now I don't have to worry about that part anymore, so I can focus on the shit that actually matters. Excuse my French, the things that I actually want to build instead of the technologies I need to build these things.
And it was interesting. If I could just interject one more time, Hannah. It was interesting. So I was in Cambridge earlier last week discussing some of these exact same things with some of the professors there. And one interesting, the ethics professor there mentioned something that was quite interesting. That actually, even if you are utilizing more and more of these technologies to kind of take over some of your tasks, actually what becomes more important are the people who still remember exactly how these things used to work, or those people who, even though AI is there, they still understand the fundamentals of what the technology is trying to do. Because obviously at some point in time, the system will break. And these people are actually going to be really, really key and important, to actually continue working and operating. So if you have skills that are specifically quite niche, don't despair. Like, please do continue to kind of delve deeper into these things, because actually your role and your job actually becomes a lot more important, because there are not that many people who know how to do what you do anymore.
No, that is so true, and it's true about everything, isn't it? So like cloud came along, and it sort of abstracted the complexity of running infrastructure at scale away from the majority of people. We still need people to build like our clouds, and it's exactly the same.
Yep.
The more you abstract the complexity away from the end user, whether that end user is the developer or anyone in their job, the more you take away that sort of, like you said, Walter, the cognitive load, the burden of like the stuff that doesn't add value, like the overhead of the task. The more you take that away, the more that individual can get done. But that doesn't mean that those things aren't happening behind the scenes. For the most part, they still are. It's just someone else is handling that complexity for you.
I remember very much, I think it was like 2014, 2015, when I met my first cloud architect who said, I've never set foot in a data center before. And I was like, oh, what? Oh, wait. Yeah, maybe you are just young enough in the working life that there is no need for you to have ever set foot in the data center. And I think we'll see similar statements here soon. People who've never known the world without having these tools at their disposal.
Yeah, AI native developers are going to be they're not here yet, but they will be here soon. Like I know, and I will work with and talk to a few coding boot camps who are really integrating that into their learning experience, because they realize that actually this is what software development will look like, and so they want their cohorts and their trainees to be equipped with those skills from day one. So it may not be what we see around us at work, but it's coming. Like these folks who are coming through these boot camps are going to be AI native developers.
And I'd also just add, just in terms of like with the deployment hat on again, it's like I remember the first time that I deployed an LLM locally, like on my machine, and I kid you not, like I had shivers down my spine. Like what? This is like what is going on here? Like this just seems like just some dark art magic stuff that's happening. And I then started to connect up like the different things that I had. So I connected a cursor to my LLM, connected. I have my own like local and my local chat and stuff. And it's like you are completely off the grid. You are just using basically your local electricity. Like you have no restrictions. Whatever it is that you're wanting to do, like you can steer this however you want. I just found that just incredibly liberating. Now, I'm sure we'll touch on like privacy and stuff in a minute, but just the ability to know that I can just do that wherever I am, even if I don't have access to the internet, and I can just have this thing just immediately available, like it's an incredible experience. So if you're an engineer out there who's never had like an LLM locally, you should definitely try it, like just for the experience of realizing how unencumbered you are once you have this thing running locally.
Agreed.
Yeah,
it's the same. That's also the same from before. Kubernetes world. Build a Kubernetes in a home lab. so you can understand what components are actually involved. And with LLM, they made it crazy simple. So it's actually a 3-minute job to bring up your own LLM.
Yeah, which is incredible, isn't it? So I'm going to start wrapping us up now because we've had a fantastic conversation, but we don't want to bore everyone too much. I mean, we could talk forever. There's so much that we could talk about. But in terms of like the question that we asked at the beginning, you know, how should you be deploying AI based like solutions? I think the resounding answer is it depends. I think what I'm hearing from you guys is actually when it comes to coding assistants and co-pilots, then whether you build or buy is an obvious decision. You buy the best because it's trained on more data. And then it really depends on your individual requirements and what you want to use it for, about whether or not you can use one of the sort of publicly hosted SaaS services, because they're very affordable and they're easy to innovate on, but they might be out of reach for you in your domain, in your context, due to sensitivity. You were talking about that just briefly then, Darryll. What advice would you give to folks who can't like reach into the cloud for whatever reason, who can't use one of these API based solutions or UI based solutions?
If they can't use it,
yes, yeah. Like what advice would you give to them if they're starting out?
if they're starting out, then I would definitely try and point them towards an internet solution, if possible. If that's not possible at all, then there are quite a few tools like Misty and LLM Factory and a few others that you can download locally, and then it just guides you through the process of downloading a local LLM. So like one of the smaller ones, and then you can chat with that and have the same experience actually as you would online. I know we even haven't touched on different modalities. When you start to talk about like generating images and pictures and stuff, like that's still all online. But in terms of text-based interactions, if you don't have the internet, but you can get somewhere to at least download temporarily, yeah, that would be my immediate thought.
Yeah, what I've seen is prohibitive in some places in the world is a credit card. So I have quite a few Iranian friends, and they can't really have a credit card if you're physically in Iran. It's almost impossible to have a credit card. So then you have a whole different experience. And then actually things like Llama, made by Meta, the Facebook guys, is really perfect. You can just download it and run it locally, and not worry about any internet firewalls and credit card situations being in your way. So I think that's really also giving liberation. Yeah, there's a whole different topic about open source, whether or not, because Meta calls this Llama 3 open source, but even the Open Source Institute is trying to figure out what actually constitutes an open source LLM. So I have a open source background, so I have a little bit of trouble with calling any LLM that's out there open source at the moment, but hopefully we'll solve this problem soon as well.
I can say that my discussions at the moment with Meta, they've actually said that they're going to make, the aim is anyway for like the future models that they're deploying, to make them more and more open, more and more available, more and more free. That's the approach that they're taking. Whether or not that obviously continues, anything can change at any point in time. But yeah.
Sounds great. So if you're watching still, thank you for joining us on Friday afternoon. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you have too. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what we're trying to create here at AI for the Rest of Us to wrap us up. So AI for the Rest of Us is literally just the result of me having conversations like this and having light bulb moments where I was like, I actually don't know anything about AI, and I feel like I really need to. I feel like this is really exciting evolution of the technical landscape. And I don't know how to navigate that yet. I genuinely don't. Like Darryll and Walter, they're so amazingly modest, but they're a few steps ahead of maybe quite a lot of the rest of us because we have day jobs and we're busy. And so I created AI for the rest of us from the realization that even folks in tech are suffering from AI FOMO. We don't have the terminology or the language or the foundational knowledge of how to have better conversations about AI and how to make good decisions about where we integrate it into our products and into our processes. So AI for the rest of us, it's a 2-day event. Day 1 focuses on that foundation. We're going to give you the terminology that you need to have better conversations about AI. And then on day 2, we're going to have those conversations. We're going to be looking at the very practical application, limitation, and some of the additional complexities and responsibilities that come with non-deterministic systems like this. So AI for the rest of us, it's a 2-day event. It's in London in the UK, 24th to 25th of October. And if you have stuck with us all this time and tuned in, you get a special 25% discount code. And it's on the screen right now. It is live 25. I do really appreciate everyone who joined us. I've been looking at the numbers and it is way more than I expected. And I'm so, so grateful to you all. Thank you, Darryll. You're awesome. Thank you, Walter. You're awesome. I hope you all have a fabulous weekend. If you want more information about AI for the rest of us, you can follow us on LinkedIn or you can just connect with me. It's just me. I'm doing this thing. I'm not a company. It's just a Hannah. So come and connect with me and I'll hook you up. Thank you and have a great weekend.
Thanks, Hannah.
Thanks. See you.